Hello, dear friends. Patrick here, chapter 5 in this video series covering The Reason for God by Timothy Keller, chapter 5. And we are going to make just a short, brief video for you today. This particular chapter is the first chapter where I was rather disappointed. And so let's get the title of the chapter for you. And it's about whether a loving God, can a loving God send people to hell? Chapter 5. Can a loving God send people to hell is the title of the chapter. And he starts off the chapter by going through this. He quotes Rick Warren and he having a difficult conversation with somebody. And he goes through this thing about magic versus science on pages 72, 73, and how they kind of evolved at the same time when science was being developed and magic was kind of at its peak, with all the metaphysical alchemy and all that kind of stuff. And it really goes off on a tangent, and I don't think it contributes to the topic of the chapter at all. But be that as it may, he talks about how hell is more acceptable than other cultures, in other cultures than in Western thought. Whereas in Western thought, the idea of a hell turns off many people to both God and Christianity. They say, well, if God sends people to hell, I don't want to worship a God like that. Or if God is all loving, he can't send people to hell, and on and on and on along that train of thought. And so he goes on to talk about whether it's a narrow view, and he says that, it's actually a more expanded view because it gives more detail, not only just in terms of the limited span of life. He talks about it being extending into eternity, so he argues that it's a broader view than the narrow view that there is nothing after death. And he quotes a lot of other philosophers. He talks about the quote from Marx on page 78, Karl Marx, how he called religion the opiate of the people, and he quotes the gentleman by the name of Milosz. He's a Nobel Prize winning Polish poet by the name of Czeslaw Milosz, Czlawmilosz, or Z, depending on whether you're here or there, is how he spells his name. And he wrote an essay called The Discrete Charms of Nihilism, and he says that the idea of having no reconciliation after death is the real opiate of the people, right? He says a true opium of the people is a belief in nothingness after death. The huge solace of thinking that our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murders are not going to be judged. But all religions recognize that our deeds are imperishable. So this is just a brief quote from Milosz. And so he goes on to argue. He gives the parable of Lazarus and the rich man being in Hades, and how the rich man was just extending his own self-centeredness, and that is kind of like a reflection of why he was in this torment, even continuing to ask Lazarus to come and help him out as if he was still his servant. And he discusses that in detail, kind of making it seem a little bit allegorical, although it doesn't say that directly. And then again, he quotes C.S. Lewis a number of times again, who he has quoted him already a number of times in previous chapters. And so his essential argument is that it has to be, a part of God's justice to have this punishments. And even though, people believe in a God of love, he says that there has to be a balance, that God wants to preserve this space of love, and this is why he must be opposed to evil. He finishes by this quote: the belief in a God of pure love who accepts everyone and judges no one would be a powerful act of faith. He says, not only is there no evidence for this in the natural order, but there's almost no historical, religious, textual support for it outside of Christianity. The more one looks at it, the less justified it appears. And so this is how he ends the chapter. That's chapter 5. And I would just like to add a couple of my own thoughts on that topic that he did not address, that I think are important for my own personal reconciliation of the concept of hell. And one of them is the idea of regret, eternal regret, these flames that cannot be extinguished. If we look at a person that's sentenced to life in prison, that every day they wake up, the bars of that prison, the surroundings of that prison cell, remind them that they have eternal regret, that they cannot escape. And so this idea is also in line with the idea where you have to be childlike to unless you become like little children, childlike to be able to accept the kingdom of God, this heaven and hell concept, because it is a perfect metaphor for regret. And that is, of course, the flames of hell that God gives as an example for those that stray away from God and try and do everything on their own. They end up having regret. And so perhaps this is the best way that God can deal with us as children, is to tell us, I've heard stories of people that when they want to teach their children not to, a pastor actually said this in one of his sermons, he wanted to teach his child not to touch the stove when it was hot. And so he took a hot dog and he turned on the burner, and then he held the child in his arms and he said, look what happens if this hot dog touches, as if it was a finger, so to speak, if it touches the burner, and of course it sizzles, and that shocked the child, and of course maybe caused the child a bit of trauma. But the child understood, no, don't go near the stove because of the danger of getting burned. And so it was vivid in their mind, and of course they never went near the stove after that. And so it could be similar for us. God says, don't end up in a permanent prison cell of your own regret. We're told stories of people when their hearts burn within them. That's another allegory. The people that were walking from Emmaus, they said their hearts burned within them. This idea of eternal flames of your heart burning, you wish you hadn't done that, and you can't go back and change the past. God has created our reality with a linear timeline. So if you do something, you can't just turn the earth around like Superman and go back and undo what you did. And so I think that is a valuable allegory, if you want to call it that, for regret. And why should eternity be hugely different from the reality that he's created for us of what we see around us today, this infinite universe, this infinite, both in either direction, in terms of the heights of heaven and the microscopic, it just goes on and on and on. And God is able to create this infinite reality for us in terms of time, depth, and space, and what is and what isn't. We're told that the things that are made up of the things that are not, and so on. And I'm rambling a little bit here, but this complex reality that God made, he said that when you reach eternity, some people will be in charge of 5 cities. And then another place, he says that it's like entering the city of God, right? Some people will be able to enter, and other people won't be able to enter that city, and they'll wish they could enter the city of God. And or people being in charge of multiple resources, saying you were faithful in this little thing, you're gonna be more responsible and have more blessedness now that you're entered into the glory of God's forever kingdom, as they call it. And so we see even in this reality, people that have, put themselves in hell. Recently there was a talk show host, and he gnashed his teeth. You hear this description of hell, the gnashing of teeth and the weeping. You're cast into the lake of fire where there is gnashing of teeth and weeping, right? And so this gentleman was gnashing his teeth at the people that he didn't like, and he ended up being removed from his position. But then after several days he returned, and with tears he tried to reconcile what he originally intended to say. So he was in a temporary hell where he was gnashing his teeth and then weeping tears, and then he was able to escape from that. And we're told in one parable in the New Testament that you shall not get out of there until you pay the last mite. And so this is the idea that to make peace with your enemy along the way. Otherwise, you'll be cast into this prison. It's the allegory is to cast into Hades, and you won't get out of there until you've paid the last mite. So that's an indication there could be some type of situations in hell that we're not familiar with, that there could be, Catholics call it purgatory, of course. You see where I'm going on that. And I don't know whether it says that we only see now through a glass darkly. We're not really sure what eternity is like. We're not really sure what hell is like. Yes, we have vivid descriptions both in the New Testament and in the book of Revelation by St. John of Patmos, but the fact is that we're not 100% sure. And I think he leaves this out of the chapter as well. He doesn't talk about the uncertainty of hell. He doesn't talk about the possibility of the allegory of the flames of regret. He doesn't talk about the difference between hell on this earth and hell in forever, or hell with regards to regret. And so I just wanted to add those comments for you to allow it to dwell in your mind perhaps a little bit and roll around in your mind a little bit. Remember, I told you that this book would help you to think about your own beliefs, help you to think about what it is that you believe. And this chapter continues to do that. However, it's the first chapter, chapter 5, that I found a little bit disappointing, that it only covered that question very circumspectly, very, very superficially, I would say. And so I hope that helps. That's chapter 5. We're going to move on. The next chapter, just giving you a little preview here, is chapter 6, and it's called Science Has Disproved Christianity. That's the title of chapter 6. So chapter 6 should be very, very interesting, both for the believer and the atheist, because this is a big, big thing that people argue all the time. They say, so I believe in science, and science is opposed to Christianity, or science disproves Christianity. And so this will be an interesting topic to address for our next video. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to do that. I'm hopefully within at least within the next week or so, but I may take a bit of a breather. I'm getting a little bit bogged down with some other projects, but we'll see. We'll keep at it, and we will definitely get through it. That's chapter 5. The only other footnote I might make is this idea of balance between heaven and hell, yin and yang, and that God has made a perfect balance. So if there is extreme injustice on one end, there is extreme retribution on the other end. But I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, because I'll leave that for another Christian thinker. You can roll that around in your brain for yourself. So thank you so much for watching. God bless you. I pray that you're able to spend time with people you love, and we shall talk to you again real soon. Have yourself a wonderful day. Just fantastic blue sky weather here today. Really, really nice. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching. Thanks a lot for the new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. If you get something out of this, double speed it, share it with somebody. Feel free to take any clips out of it if you want. And have yourself a blessed day. Talk to you soon. Bye.